This is Barry Zalma speaking for Claim School Incorporated's blog, Zalma on Insurance. Today we're going to talk about why insurance fraudsters are just annoying people and why, after a conviction for, among other things, insurance fraud, a parole violation put the convicted fraudster back in jail, with no hopes of reducing his sentence. In Commonwealth of Pennsylvania versus Kalani Watts, the Superior Court of Pennsylvania Appellate Division on January 27, 2025, dealt with the efforts of Watts, who had entered a negotiated guilty plea to one count each of obtaining possession of a controlled substance by misrepresentation, fraud, forgery, or subterfuge, and insurance fraud. On July 21, 2014, in accordance with the plea agreement, the trial court imposed an aggregate sentence of 6 to 12 years in prison. Watts also pled guilty to one count of receiving stolen property. On September 3, 2014, the trial court sentenced Watts to 16 to 36 months in prison to run concurrently with his sentence in the drug and insurance fraud case. Watts alleged he was paroled on June 20, 2019, and moved thereafter to the state of Georgia. 3 years later, Watts was arrested on misdemeanors and returned back to Pennsylvania on a parole violation. Upon being seen by the Pennsylvania Board of Probation and Parole, Watts was informed that his maximum sentence was moved from July 12, 2026 to April 29, 2029. A big move when he could have stayed in Georgia and been safe from parole violation if he committed no crimes. In this appeal, Watts, acting as his own attorney, appeals from the orders dismissing as untimely his first petitions filed under the Post-Conviction Relief Act, the PCRA. Appellant Watts filed identical pro se, or acting as his own attorney, PCRA petitions at two different courts. He then filled out portions of a pre-printed PCRA petition form and also incorporated an attached petition for enforcement of negotiated plea agreement. The PCRA court further observed that appellant's petitions appeared to challenge the Parole Board's decision to revoke his parole and pull his street time. In the alternative, the PCRA court determined that the Parole Board's decision did not constitute a violation of the plea agreement. Pro se litigants, those acting as their own attorney without any experience, knowledge, or training, must still comply with the procedural rules set forth in the Pennsylvania Rules of Court. Preliminarily, although the court was willing to construe liberally materials filed by the pro se litigant, a pro se appellant enjoys no special benefit. To the contrary, any person choosing to represent himself in a legal proceeding must, to a reasonable extent, assume that his lack of expertise and legal training will be his undoing. Here, although Appellant Watts cited various provisions of the federal and state constitution, he failed to identify any decision of the United States Supreme Court or the Pennsylvania Supreme Court recognizing a new constitutional right to allow him to not have to serve the extra time. as Watts has waived each of his issues raised on appeal. The Court of Appeal affirmed the PCRA court's orders dismissing his position and dismissing his petitions, and therefore he is to stay in jail until 2029. In my opinion, people who engage in criminal conduct, especially when that conduct is insurance fraud, are not members of Mensa. Mr. Watts was a regular, albeit inept, criminal. He was lucky enough to be paroled, only to be put back in jail for breaching the conditions of his parole by committing some misdemeanors. He then tried to change his sentence by applying as his own attorney for post-conviction relief, but couldn't come up with the ground that the court sitting as an appellate court could apply to help Mr. Watts. That also failed because the bases he used just did not exist and were not established. So the lesson, of course, is when you're given parole, stay away from crime or you'll be thrown back into jail. This video was adapted from my blog, Zelma on Insurance, which is available free to anyone who clicks on the URL zelma.com/blog. You can subscribe to the blog, and if you do, you'll receive notice of every blog posting, usually 5, sometimes 6 a week. And you will also have access to the more than 4,950 blog postings. Please tell your friends and colleagues about this blog and these videos so that they too can subscribe. And if you're interested in further detail about insurance, insurance claims, insurance law, and insurance fraud, please consider for a very small fee subscribing to my Substack publication. Thank you for your attention.